What I'm starting to see is many of those enterprise organisations are now going to these startup frontier firms to make sure that they can rapidly adopt AI. As this moves faster, companies that don't are going to get left behind. And I think there is a point of view that said some of the very famous FTSE companies that we have today globally may not exist if they don't continue to innovate and adapt.
Welcome to the Politics. I'm Steve Rigby, Chief Exec of the Rigby Group, one of the UK's largest private businesses. And today I've got the pleasure of Dame Claire Barclay. She is President of Microsoft for Enterprise and Infrastructure in EMEA, and she's also the Chair of the Industrial Strategy Advisory Council, setting out the UK's future policy around industrial strategy. Today we're going to talk about two things which are close to both our hearts. The first is artificial intelligence, where Microsoft is one of the leading businesses. And the second is diving into that industrial strategy and importantly talking about areas such as productivity, skills and the regions. So Claire, welcome to the Policy Fix.
Oh, it's great to be here. Thank you for asking me.
For those of you that don't know you, obviously you wear many hats. So just describe maybe the two primary hats that you wear, if you can do for me.
Yeah, so I'm an executive at Microsoft. So I'm the President of Enterprise and Industry for Europe, Middle East and Africa. And I'm also chair of the Industrial Strategy Advisory Council. Again, quite long terms there, but maybe the Microsoft one hopefully is self-explanatory.
Yeah, and maybe we'll get to the industrial strategy a bit later in the episode if we can do.
Yeah.
Perhaps we might break the conversation into two parts. So you and I are in the technology business. We've known each other some time. You work at Microsoft, which was 50 last year. Obviously, in our group, Rigby Group, we were also 50 last year. And 50 years in technology is almost the lifespan of technology.
It is, yeah.
We have HP and IBM as older businesses, but very different types of technology that we're focused on today. If we talk about Microsoft a little bit, I mean, it's an amazing company, the third largest business in the world, $3.6 trillion market capitalization, which is almost unthinkable. $330 billion of revenue, which is a behemoth business, and the one that gets me is $200 billion of EBITDA.
Yeah.
So a hugely profitable company. And actually you start to look at the valuation and say this isn't a company that's overvalued. It's a company that's producing huge amounts of cash. And the surprising thing is at that size, you're growing at 15% a year.
Yeah. No pressure.
No pressure. I mean, Satna seems to be, an unbelievable tour de force in our industry. Give us a view of what life in Microsoft is like. You're at the very top of the organisation in Europe. Give us a view of what life at Microsoft is really like.
I mean, actually, the 50th anniversary was kind of a big milestone. I've worked at the company for 27 of those years, so I've seen so many iterations of the company. You remember in those, when SEC was established as well, like in those early days, Microsoft was really known as a consumer company. You think of the launch of Windows 95. We went through a very big iteration of how to become an enterprise company. We then became a cloud company. And we're now in the middle of another reinvention, which is really about the advent of AI. And, huge capital infrastructure investments with data centers. Obviously, energy planning becomes very important for that. And really how that provision for capacity for AI will define really about what the next innovation and delivery is going to be. So I think working there and having worked there for as long as I have, it's not for the faint-hearted, because you've really got to, in order to continue to be relevant, in order to differentiate, in order to continue to add value to clients, you've got to continue to reinvent yourselves, and I guess that's what makes it the company that it is.
And it's interesting how many categories of technology that you're number one or number two in.
Yeah.
I've always focused on Jack Welch's comment about get big, get niche or get out. And I think you've done that broadly as an organisation. You've either got to the very top of a sector or you've broadly de-invested. But, from gaming through to cloud, through to the desktop enterprise software, I mean, it really is an amazing set of technologies that you're focused on. If we just look at AI, if we can do perhaps for the next couple of questions, obviously artificial intelligence is at its very early stages. And I think perhaps 2 years ago, we probably all thought the journey was really quite short. It's feeling a bit more like a long game at this moment. And I think certainly when I talk to people like NVIDIA, they see us very much at the foothills of the sector. And in the business that we're predominantly focused around enterprise customers, those very large customers and government bodies, the journey hasn't even really started yet. Other than some productivity-based tools, the re-engineering of those organisations, their business models around AI, we're really at the very, very starting point of that. Can you perhaps share with us your thoughts on how much time do we have to adjust? Because there's a lot of change to happen, and where you see the technology going and how it will transform the business landscape.
Yeah, I mean, it's a tricky question, is that how long do you have time to adjust? Because the adjustment of organisations will be where they get their competitive edge from. So the quicker companies choose to adjust, evolve and adopt some of the technology and tools will be how they think about efficiency, innovation, improvement in their supply chain and processes. And I think that's the early iteration of what you're seeing. You mentioned the use on productivity tools, and I'd say in the enterprise that's becoming relatively standard now. So, you think summarization of emails and summarization of documents, note-taking, document creation, that kind of stuff. I think the next, and we refer to it in Microsoft as sort of this idea of becoming a frontier firm, and organizations were ensuring that employees had productivity tools, and so that was the first advent of AI. We're now seeing AI being used and sort of being observed and monitored by humans and employees. And the next iteration will be the sort of hiring of agents, where agents are running everything and they're running some of the processes and the ways that customers are doing. So I'll give you an example. If you're thinking about customer service and journeys within banking, for example, most of those processes are extremely long and cumbersome, and they involve many, many, many steps. The idea that you can actually just shrink that by having automated agents that could take actions on their behalf. Now, obviously, you have to do that in a regulatory environment to make sure that it's monitored, recorded, all that kind of stuff. But there are certain steps that are very easily done by agents. And that's the kind of next stage that we're starting to see within enterprises. I mean, I have the pleasure in my job not only of working with enterprise organizations, but I'm also working with some of the bleeding edge AI companies. So you think of Wave, autonomous vehicles, Mistral, the French Paris-based model company. And actually what I'm starting to see is many of those enterprise organizations are now going to these startup frontier firms to make sure that they can rapidly adopt AI. So I think, going back to your question, how long do you have? This is definitely the topic of a board. It's definitely the topic of an executive team. And I'd say, you need to act now, because companies are definitely starting to embrace these tools. And I think as this moves faster, companies that don't are going to get left behind. And I think, there is a point of view that said some of the very famous FTSE companies that we have today globally may not exist if they don't continue to innovate and adapt.
I mean, even Microsoft, you would say historically you have an amazing defensive moat around most of your technologies.
That's right.
But you've got to rewrite all those technologies in an agentic way.
Yep.
So you yourself are continually now under threat in those core industries, which, you seem to be running very, very, very hard to fix that.
Yeah.
But, born in the cloud, organisations that don't have legacy to evolve, they do appear for all of us. I have exactly the same issue in my business. Those businesses that are smaller, nimbler, and don't have legacy, they have an advantage.
Yeah, every company, even a company the size of Microsoft, has to reinvent. And I get to work with many smaller software companies, and they may have had a very strong SaaS application, and they're now having to think, like, what's going to disrupt that? What will be the role that AI could augment that? How are they going to serve customers in a different way? And then who are the competitors that are around the corner that may come up with a brand new idea? They only employ 10 people, and suddenly their market share is diluted. So I think just for larger organisations, mid-sized organisations, you kind of need to keep an eye on what is going on out there. Because the pace of innovation, I've never seen anything like it. I think, we've worked through many iterations together.
This is a different level.
Together, see the pace and the level of change and the level of learning, and I know we'll come back to that later. It's eye-watering.
It's happening probably the fastest for graduates in those professional services jobs where margins are higher, people can invest in technology, they are rules-based activity. But, I think we'll have to segment where the changes in society come and how fast they're going to happen.
Yeah, I think of it. You talked about the contact centre and service desk. There are some areas that are sort of no regret adoption of AI. If you think of, and you'll know this work well, but, you think of the process of managing a call centre, and the recording of that, and the the identification of the problem, and how do you log that, how do you deliver good customer service. And it's certainly within Microsoft, that's one of the areas. You imagine how many support calls we take for everything from Xbox to Azure. That's one of the areas that we went directly after, because it adds it takes out so much cost out of our business, and delivers better NPS scores for our clients.
We're coming up now to an anniversary of the AI Opportunities Plan, which was the government's policy for all intents and purposes, written by Matt Clifford, who I'm sure you know well. And many have been adopted by government, now led by Kanisha, the AI Minister. What are your thoughts a year on from that plan? And can we have a fixed plan, or do we need something that's a bit more iterative?
I mean, in the world of AI, you can't have anything that's fixed. I mean, I would say the principle of that plan that Matt led, excellent. Like having a very clear and detailed strategy supported by government, where you tackle bit by bit, that says these are the things that we have to go do. Doing that in partnership with business, which they did very effectively. I mean, they certainly worked with many of the tech companies. I'm sure you were included in that. So we've all got kind of a framework for the way that we're engaging with government. But I think the thing that they have got to do is they've got to continue to iterate it. This world is not staying normal. It's not staying the same. And so I think the continued focus on the way that we will go about that. Now, the good news is that actually I think the government is continuing to evolve that. And actually I think Peter Kyle joining the Department of Business and Trade from his DSIT role, I think he's obviously very, very passionate about the opportunity that the AI technology brings for the UK, and I'm sure we'll talk more about that.
So one of the challenges we face as a private company is that sometimes our appetite is our own appetite rather than the market's. And if we're not growing at the rate of the market, then we're going backwards. So as a private company, we have to treat ourselves in an almost public environment to make sure that we're pacing at the same pace as the market. If the market's growing at 7%,
that's right,
we need to grow at least at 7%. You have exactly the same challenge, although you're probably setting the pace rather than anything else. And so I think in that situation, the UK strategy can't just be about our pace. It has to be about the pace of the US, the pace of China,
the global pace,
the pace of India, the pace of the UAE. And I'm not sure we always get that in the UK. I think there's so much happening. Obviously, a change of government. It's very easy to criticise much of what the government's doing, but actually when you dig beneath the surface and you read the policy papers and you get beneath what's actually happening, there is an awful lot of good work happening in this government today. AI being one of them, industrial strategy we'll talk about a bit later being another. But I think the pace perhaps of prioritisation, we can't do 100 things well as a country. We're going to have to pick a small number of fights that we stay super relevant for. I mean, do you concur with that principle that AI probably has to be one of those fights that's critical for our societal...
I mean, I'm a bit biased here to even know that question, but yes, absolutely. I mean, it's one of the things that I'm blessed with the both jobs I do, because I get to see the global picture at Microsoft, and then I get to encourage the UK government to also make sure they think globally. Because if you think of innovations like AI, and actually many of the companies that are global and adopting it and using it, whether you're a startup or a multinational, many organisations are running globally. So if you're thinking about innovation and technology, you're not just thinking about the UK, you're thinking about innovation in the robotics space from China, you're thinking about the model companies from the US, so you have to think of how to embrace all of the innovation that's happening globally, and then make sure that actually we encourage businesses in the UK to be early adopters, and we encourage really good close collaboration between the government and business, so that actually people continue to invest in the UK and we continue to make the UK a great place to work.
Yeah, I fully agree with that. So last question on AI. As a family, we're going to be on the right side of AI. So we're doing, I think, enough to make sure that we will make a return on what we're doing. I break it into 4 things. Consumption, so how do we consume the technology ourselves? Probably the hardest of all the things we're doing. How we resell technology, working with people like Microsoft and others. How we invest in technology, so like Microsoft, again, we have a strong venture capital arm. But we're also looking philanthropically and primarily at skills. We're just about to kick off a project focused on adult skills, and perhaps skills focused on those people in the middle stage of their career or towards the end of their career, where I'm very fearful that there could be a real societal shift and problem if roles disappear. And if you're 55 or you're 60 and your role and your livelihood disappears, the ability to retrain once that's gone, your confidence probably is being knocked.
Yeah.
And people could feel, frankly, left on the scrap heap, which is societally a problem. Personally, it's something we don't need to have. And therefore, I'm a great believer that actually iterative training of people through these next 5 years, as the world starts to develop, is really key. Can we perhaps get your view on skills?
Yeah, I mean, I think I talked about this sort of pace of change, and it's sort of almost being breathtaking, the amount of innovation that's coming. And so I think if you don't have a mindset of like always on learning, and you're not a business that's always investing in your people, I think what you said is right. I think the risk of people being left behind or feeling that this is not it's not an industrial wave that they can be part of is a real risk. And so I think there's a great opportunity for your company, companies like Microsoft, all of the tech companies together with government. And this is actually one of the things I do push the government on a lot. The government talks a lot about the skilling requirements they do. They talk about the kind of how to make sure that we keep our universities at pace, etc. But there's such a wonderful opportunity to do that together with business. I think there are many organisations, and the Rigby Group will be a great example of that are doing some amazing work. Mm-hmm. But actually, it doesn't need to be, you don't need to do it on your own. We don't need to do it on our own. And the government certainly doesn't and shouldn't do it on its own. Actually, I welcomed some of the work that the government did last year with the tech industry, where they actually brought together all of the tech companies. We're a very competitive bunch.
Sure.
But actually, we did come together on that. And, you don't want, if you're 55 and your job has changed, etc., you don't want to be bamboozled by every different single training company or training scheme that's available. You want something that's really easy to be able to get engaged with, and you want companies to sort of bring that together. And I think government can be a good convener for that, but it's the companies themselves that will be able to do that work. So, I worry about that age group, but I also worry about the young people. Mm-hmm. And just thinking about what that world of work is going to be, because it is going to be different. I have two young sons, and they're often asking me. One of them wants to be a game developer, and I'm like, that world will change. But actually, the world of creativity won't change. The world of producing things won't change. But maybe the method of the way that he might code to produce games will change. And I think I try and coach him and other young people to say, always have a growth mindset, always have a mindset that if you're open to learning and open to trying new things, then you will keep pace. But that's probably not how it was when we were coming out of university or not, So I think if you think of people later in their career who perhaps don't work in technology, they may think it's an unpenetrable world. So I think the more open accessibility that we can do, the more apprentice-style programs for people at different stages of their career, I think would be very welcome.
Yeah, the Growth and Skills Levy is the replacement for the apprenticeship levy, and I think using the word apprentice for older people it's a difficult phrase, I think.
Yeah.
So in the last year or so, you've taken on a government role for the first time formally, and you're chairing something called the Industrial Strategy Advisory Group. Can you give us a little bit of background, if you could do? Yeah.
So it was. There have been many iterations of industrial strategy across governments, but the focus that this government has is an Industrial Strategy Advisory Council that is an independent group of business leaders, trade unions, academics, and our role is to advise ministers on implementations for policy that will make a material difference to productivity and growth for the country. So that's the broad grand charter that we have, and obviously we're focusing in on the things that we think will make a bigger difference, and we can perhaps chat about that.
Yeah. So it's interesting that Greg Clark, who is the author of the previous industrial strategy, is on that council, which actually I think is very positive. He's a Conservative previous Secretary of State, very capable man in my experience of him.
He's excellent, and actually the ability to learn from what worked and what didn't work before is extremely useful.
But you're talking to Greg, and the last time we did this, it was a much less detailed process than we've had this time. So Sam Lister, the Director General of the DBT, Department of Business and Trade has led this with 65 people. It's a big commitment, not only your group, but a big permanent commitment of that team. So just talk us through the process that's gone on in the background and how you've arrived at what is incredibly comprehensive strategy that's been written.
Yeah.
But just give us a little bit of background on the lead up perhaps to that process.
Yeah, and so we were established as a council a year ago, and were given a sort of mandate by the government on 8 industrial priorities. And that's maybe the first thing to point out. If you're operating in any business, you obviously have priorities and you pick your bets. That was not a given with the government, actually. And so really thinking about what drives growth for the country and how you intersect both the industries that you pick together with the places that you pick is really about what will provide great jobs, drive growth and drive investment. And that's the theory behind it. And so we have worked together across all of the government departments, which I'm sure you know is not a mean feat, to make sure that actually the industrial plans that have been put together, so whether that's the life sciences plan or the manufacturing plan, etc., that the policies that are being put in place are things that would materially make a difference to growth and opportunity and investment for businesses in the UK, and obviously would also attract inward investment into the UK. So a very, very comprehensive process. What we've done is we've taken experts from the council and buddied them up on particular strategies and plans, and then we've worked with the amazing civil service team in order to make sure that the policies then get implemented. So I know that sounds very highfalutin and government business-like, but I think the principle is, how do you actually create something that is long-term in length, because it's a 10-year strategy, but things that actually materially are going to make a difference, not just to businesses in the UK, but to actual people and actual jobs, so that we continue to provide an environment where people can thrive in the UK.
Well, what I see in the industrial strategy, A, is a very well-written document, but importantly then sub-plans that sit beneath each sector. And I also see a deployment then down to a regional level to devolved administrations who have got their own growth plans, but are being asked very firmly to link those into the industrial strategies.
Yeah.
Perhaps just give us a bit of a lens on that, if you could do, as to how much focus was about growth and how much is about cementing our strong position in certain sectors.
It is both. I mean, it definitely is both, because you want to, if you take the specialism of manufacturing in the West Midlands, you want to make sure that the very assets that we've got and the great jobs that we have there that are protected. And I mentioned that we have the unions on our council kind of for that reason, to make sure that we think about, not just jobs now, but actually how do you skill people? How do you think about the change in the industry? And how do we make sure that we, industries like manufacturing in West Midlands remains competitive? But equally, if you think of, AI automation, you think about robotics, you think about the competition from China, you kind of need to evolve and think about what will the next version of manufacturing in the West Midlands look like. And so, we've had the pleasure, you talked about the regional connection and the devolved governments. I mean, part of the collaboration we've done is not just with businesses, but also with the mayors. We've had the pleasure of working with all the mayors, and you imagine they all want investment. They all want the thing.
All 8,
they all want the thing in their country, in their area. They're, whenever I say I'm doing something in this area, no, you need to be doing it in this area, etc. So, but actually, I think I've enjoyed working with them, because I think they take it from something that can be quite abstract, government strategy, government industrial strategy, and they take it down to kind of what that actually means in Solihull, or what that actually means, in Manchester. And so I actually welcome the practicality, because often they'll say, these are the things that matter. This is what you need to do with our local universities. This is how it connects into our healthcare system. This is how it connects. So it is the manifestation of the way the industrial strategy actually plays out. Because you can have a great document that is for 10 years and very well written, but if it doesn't mean that the people of West Midlands can actually take advantage of AI, robotics, and what the future is going to be in autonomous vehicles or whatever it's going to be, then it doesn't matter really. So I think that interconnection with place is a really, really important part of the industrial strategy.
Yes, I agree. hopefully technology forms a key part of the industrial strategy as well. I mean, we've got eight sectors, what are now called the IS8.
I try not to be biased, Steve, but technology does play a role in it, yes.
And where do you think productivity will go? Because we've been stuck as a country for the last 10 years on productivity. We're now about 20% behind Germany and France, and a much more significant number behind the US. We've got China as a decreasing population with really a ferocious adoption of automation, robotics and AI. Can we catch up in that environment? Because we have to break through this productivity challenge that we have, especially in an environment where we have ourselves a falling population just starting from 2030. And yes, we can fix that through migration, as we've been doing for a number of years. But ultimately, it's the productivity per citizen that we really need to get right. So how do we embed that more in the strategy for the country?
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously at the heart of the, all of the focus on these 8 industrial sectors is because they are the fastest growing sectors. They're the ones that actually drive productivity, they drive jobs, and they drive growth for the country. But actually, if you look, coming back to place again, if you look at the data, so much of that productivity and growth comes from London. And so if we had a magic wand and you just increased the productivity of all the other major cities by 1 or 2 points, it would have a material impact for the UK. But sadly, it's not as straightforward as that. You can't wave a magic wand and away you go. And so the idea of taking the focus and applying it in a place and then thinking about skills, planning, regulation, and bringing all that together is what we believe will unlock the opportunity. And although one of the sectors is technology, given you asked me about that, I think of technology really as an underpin to all of the other sectors as well. So it's both a industry in its own right, but it's also what will that do to kind of lift the great growth that we have in financial services, or the efficiency that we have in manufacturing, or the future breakthroughs in life sciences, or the breakthroughs in healthcare, etc. So
I think the productivity challenge, is really place specific. So if I take somewhere like the Black Country in the West Midlands, I think it's at 77% of the national productivity. But that's partly down to the makeup of the businesses that are there. And actually maybe setting a goal of 82% is okay, because we have London, knocking the lights out on productivity because it's got such a large professional services community, great financial services community, great technology businesses, all of which more and more I hear that we have an advantage over the EU on because of our regulatory approach. So I think it's about setting the right goals for the country and not expecting every ship to rise at the same time.
And I think what we did actually in the way where we set the industrial strategy was, obviously we had to make choices on place and where investment went, etc. But what we tried to show is kind of what good looks like. And so wherever you are in productivity in place, there is an ambition for the things that you can kind of rise to the tide on, and the kinds of things that you can get engaged on. And I'm sure even in West Midlands, although you have all 8, there will be prioritisation that you're going to be thinking about as part of that for the things that are going to have the most material impact.
No doubt. In reality, we'll only see progress, by the end of this Parliament, we may start to see some progress about the work that's happened.
Yeah.
So, we've got to allow that time to transition.
Yeah.
So, Claire, I think we're both really big fans of the UK tech sector, and clearly given our careers to that space. But globally, we are in quite a strong position to have, if you like, the brain power for the technology sector. But we've never really commercialised that behind the very biggest businesses. That's very much been a US domain. What do you see as the future for the UK tech sector?
Well, I mean, the ingredients that the UK has that makes the UK tech sector strong, you think it's universities, it's skills, it's access to finance, it's great innovation and great ideas. The Wave one is a good example of that. I think that we have the ingredients that does this as good as the US. Obviously, they're slightly larger than us, and so I feel like if we can just make sure we bring those ingredients together, then with the right access to finance, etc., I feel like the opportunity for the UK tech sector is limitless. And I talked about the investments that Microsoft, Nvidia, and others have made. I think the large hyperscalers and tech companies and the level of investment that they're putting into the UK tells you what a special tech sector we've got, because they wouldn't be doing it if they didn't see the opportunity.
Yeah, I've talked before about the fact that unicorns are what they are. They're a rare beast. And are we better to have a field of thoroughbreds than just unicorns? So for me, it isn't just about the biggest companies in the
No.
world. I know Peter Carl set the ambition for $1 trillion company here in the UK. That's a tall ask. AstraZeneca and HSBC around the $300 million mark today. But as I said, that field of thoroughbred companies, if we can just build lots of great organisations that perhaps might be around the $100 million mark of revenues, that would be a great place to be. There'd be significant taxpayers, significant creators of intellectual property, great employers. And I really think we should not lose sight of the fact that great medium to large size businesses,
Absolutely.
not mega cap businesses, is also a great landing zone for the UK to be
Well,
in.
it's like any portfolio that you manage inside your organisation, isn't it? You don't just have your big ones. You need a good balanced portfolio. I mean, if I think about the success of Microsoft in the UK, of which SEC is definitely one of them, we have 30,000 businesses that operate in and around Microsoft. Some of them are really big, some of them are small, but it's the portfolio of that, because you've got to be able to serve different places. You've got to be able to serve small customers, big customers, etc. And so I think making sure that we don't lose sight of those mid-size. And I go back to productivity that we were talking about earlier on. The big companies will get that right, undoubtedly. But if we don't rise the middle, then we won't achieve growth and productivity gain for the UK.
And I think there is a fascination with the very large and the very small in the UK government. Actually, 70% of employees work in medium-sized companies.
Yeah.
So it's really important to build that ecosystem as well.
I'll make sure I take that back.
Thank you. So we both have children in their teenage years and beyond. If I look at my 21-year-old, my middle son, he's convincing me that there's going to be $1 billion one-person company, and therefore, not surprisingly, he's struggling to stay at university because he wants to go and build that company. So what's the advice that you give your children and to other 18-year-olds about what they should be thinking about in their careers ahead?
Do you know, I think the biggest piece of advice I give to all 18-year-olds, including your 21-year-old, is like, pick something that they love. That would be advice number one, because I always think, like, I've had the blessing of an unbelievable career working in tech, and it never feels like work. You're always coming up with different ideas, and I'm sure you feel the same in the group that you've been part of. So that would be advice number one. Pick something that you love. I think there's something now in the new era of AI where you've got to have an always-on learning mindset. If you don't always learn and stay up to date with what's going on, I don't think you'll be relevant in the employment space. And then I think the third one, perhaps when you and I were coming out of school or university, the idea that you would go and work for an employer, I think a bit like your son, this sort of spirit of entrepreneurialism is, I think, what will pave the next wave of opportunity. My son wants to be a game developer and he wants to run his own independent game company.
Yep.
I said that's pretty hard. It's quite competitive. But
why not try?
But why not? Give it a go. So that's what he's doing. And so I think this idea that, careers are not linear. It's not you go and work for a company and work there forever. And if you want to go and dream of setting up your $1 billion company, then go for it.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think the skills that they can learn today, my son, didn't come from a technical background, but is busy writing code now because there's so much great code content creation that you can do with
AI can be your friend, right?
Indeed. So I think the opportunities for young people, while some are narrowing down, I think there's much more weight towards new opportunities appearing, in content creation, in, as I say, in coding, building products yourself. The ability to do those things, which were unthinkable before, without hiring a huge team and raising a lot of capital.
Exactly.
Our young people can try and strive to be entrepreneurs.
Yeah, and I want to maybe avoid the... sometimes when I'm talking to young people, they are worried of what AI is going to do. And I always say to them, like, it's all opportunity. So just make sure that you get behind that wave.
Yeah, I think you can look through the wrong way of the telescope with AI.
Particularly if you read the press.
Yeah. But for young people, it's a huge opportunity, but they've just got to get on the train quickly.
Exactly.
So as you know, on this show, we give a charitable donation to our guests your time is important. Perhaps share with us the charity that you're going to support today.
Yeah, so the charity I thought of picking today is Crisis. I don't know whether it was as I was travelling through London yesterday, it was -5. And it did make me think. I know Matt Downey very well and the amazing work that they do on, helping people rebuild their lives who have become homeless. And there's nothing, obviously we've just been through Christmas, and I felt that this charity, I felt for the amount of money that you're giving, which is very generous of you, so thank you, it could have a material impact for a charity like Crisis, and hopefully sometimes it's a small thing that gets people lifted out of the lives that they're leading. So that's kind of what
It's such a complex area of homelessness. It's not just about money, as you know, it's about addiction, it's about hope, it's about health. And, I think that's a really great charity, so well done for doing that.
Yeah, pleasure.
So we're called The Policy Fix. We're perhaps both going to respond to this one if we can do, but you first. Perhaps share with us one or two policies that you think are really critical for the future in the coming years.
Well, I mean, maybe I'll start with how we tackle skills. I think we've touched on that in the podcast. But if we think about what future skills are going to look like for the UK, it's a very hard one policy-wise to get the right intervention. But I think from an industrial strategy standpoint, it's one that we're very, very focused on together with Skills England, who are the body that obviously work on the skills plans together with the government. The other one I'll do with my Microsoft hat on. If I think about the next 2 to 3 to 5 years and the role of AI and how that's going to transform societies as well as the UK, that will not be possible, and we will not reach our ambition if we don't get planning and regulation right, and we don't get the provision of energy right. Energy costs in the UK are higher than any other country. In the industrial strategy, we did put some short-term fixes in there, but that's definitely something, both with my Microsoft hat on and the industrial strategy chair, that's really important to future growth and prosperity for the UK.
Yes, certainly talking to some key people in the industry, that relationship between the Department of Energy and Net Zero and the Department of Science and Innovation, they've got to be joined. We can't do one without the other. We can't want to be an AI superpower and have 4 AI growth zones if we also don't have provision of power and maybe even temporary gas turbine generation whilst that power is coming on stream. You've made a huge commitment to the UK. I think it's $20 billion
That's right.
of commitment on data centres. So that energy point for you is super critical. If we're going to keep you here, and it's a global race, we know we're an expensive country to have AI density in, then the government has to find a way to support organisations like yourself and the other large hyperscale providers of AI infrastructure.
Yeah. I mean, but hopefully, sort of ending on a positive note for the UK, companies like Microsoft wouldn't be investing that scale of money if they didn't believe in the opportunity for the UK. It's the largest market for us outside of the US.
Yes.
And really, I think it's about the environment that will provide growth, provide energy, provide planning that will unlock that growth and opportunity.
And more and more sovereignty is going to become a critical issue, either sovereignty for companies of their data, and they may build their own small language model environments, or sovereignty as countries for government activity. So I think Microsoft is super well placed to benefit from that. From my side, just relating to the conversation, two things I would say. One is around the AI skills agenda. A lot of companies are under pressure. They're not operating on the same rates of margin, and allowing them to use some of that growth and skills levy to focus on helping to retrain their staff. And using the word apprenticeship, as I say, is difficult for somebody in their mid-stage of their career, will be the first. And then the second sits around the industrial strategy, which I know it's a 10-year strategy that's been written, but these strategies have a tendency not to last that long. And unfortunately for Greg, on the last strategy, Boris Johnson cancelled that strategy. I look even at the Department of Business and Trade, in the last 10 years, has had 3 names. And so really sticking somehow through the electoral cycles, whatever happens in 3.5 years, and really getting behind that industrial strategy on a long-term basis and gaining a cross-party consensus for doing that feels a really key issue for the country.
Yeah, and I think it's where, you imagine the people working on the industrial strategy on the council are very passionate about kind of the longevity of this, because in a way, if you start on these things, then you're never going to have a long-term plan. I mean, I think if you think of the countries that have very successful strategies, you look at Singapore, you look at Japan, that they really have them over decades.
Listen, thanks for your time today. You're a really busy person, so I'm very grateful for you coming on the show. But thank you very much, Claire.
Thank you, Steve. It's been a pleasure.
So I hope you enjoyed the episode. If you'd like to see more episodes of The Policy Fix, please click here.